Wearing a mask during the pandemic can help save lives. It could even save our economy. Our sister station in Houston connects the dots.
The use of masks during this global coronavirus pandemic has become a hot-button issue, but a new report puts the debate in stark economic terms. Let's connect the dots. Goldman Sachs crunched the numbers. It wanted to find out what a national face mask mandate would mean for the economy. The team of economists found that areas that did not impose a rule on face coverings showed more COVID-19 infections and deaths, findings that are backed up by other research. And here's how that affects the economy. With a surge of cases in parts of the country, many states are having to halt or roll back reopening plans. The Goldman Sachs economists project those lockdowns will cost 5% of the gross domestic product. That translates to $1 trillion. They also calculated the rate of spread with and without a face mask mandate. The researchers estimated the daily growth rate for new infections without a nationwide face mask order is just over 17% per week, but just over 7% with an order. A Johns Hopkins epidemiologist cautioned in the Washington Post that it's hard to make a straight connection between mask orders and infection rates because of other steps leaders take that could affect the numbers. But she does say her research has found masks are an important component to stopping the pandemic.
Well, those findings are a stand in stark contrast to President Trump's skepticism towards masks. The president claims that masks are, quote, a double-edged sword. He refuses to wear one in public.